A 10 p.m. curfew for a 27-year-old. My mother sneered. Give me 10 unbreakable rules. And my father yelled. If you don't like our rules, you can leave. So, I made one rule that made them regret. My name's Ethan Tran. I'm 27. And 2 weeks after a flood wrecked my apartment, my parents taped a laminated list of household rules for adult children to the door of my childhood bedroom. It was my mother's handwriting ornate loops. Sharp periods. The kind of penmanship teachers used to staple on bulletin boards. The paper itself was the good cardstock from Dad's home office. The same kind they used for Christmas letters and neighborhood potlucks. The tape was perfectly squared at each corner. It looked less like a note and more like a certificate. As if someone had passed an exam in obedience, and this was the diploma. I stood there with a duffel bag biting into my shoulder and read it once. Then again. Slowly. Is the way you read a contract before signing. Then rules. 10. For a grown man with a graduate degree, who pays his own bills and temporarily pays them $800 a month to sleep under the roof, where he learned long division. Rule 1. Curfew of 1000 p.m. on weeknights. Rule 2. All household members must follow established guidelines. Rule 3. All guests must be approved 48 hours in advance. Rule 4. No eating in bedrooms. Rule 5. Kitchen cleanup must be completed within 30 minutes of meal end. Rule 6. Laundry days are assigned. Not chosen. Rule 7. Mandatory family dinners. No phones allowed. Rule 8. All purchases over $100 must be discussed with parents first. Rule 9. Vehicle use requires 24-hour advance notice. Rule 10. Weekly inspection of my room for cleanliness. I laughed once, one of those single, disbelieving bursts that don't sound happy, and then stopped. Because I could hear my parents in the kitchen. Pans touched the stovetop. Cabinet doors closed with that same careful finality as the tape on the corners of the page. Ethan, Mom called. Her voice floated down the hall, warm and composed. The way nurses sound even when they're giving you a shot. Come, say hello. She was already standing by the island when I walked in, apron on, hair pinned back. Smile. Set. Dad leaned against the counter. Arms folded. Wearing the look he reserves for weather reports and lecturing about tire rotation, calm. Certain. Mildly disappointed in the world. You found the list. Mom said. Like she'd left me a plate of cookies. Now that you're back under our roof. These are non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. Dad echoed. A bass note behind her. Is that really necessary? I asked. I kept my tone even. Like, I was asking whether they wanted tea or coffee. I'm 27. This is just until repairs are finished. That's exactly why it's necessary. Mom said. Pleased to be on a well-worn track. Short stays become long ones without boundaries. You'll thank us later. Dad nodded. Structure is good for you. The thing about my parents is they believe in systems the way other people believe in luck. Color-coded calendars were our religion. When I was 8 and forgot my lunch, Mom didn't drop it off, she added a checklist to the fridge. When I was 15 and wanted to stay out late after a school concert, Dad had me submit a written plan itinerary. Phone numbers. Who drove. What time I'd be back. What I would do if the car broke down. There's a security in that. I guess. But there's also a way the rules grow roots and wrap around everything. Even when you're taller than the refrigerator. I took a breath. Okay. I said. Understood. Mom's smile brightened like a dimmer switch sliding up. Good. You can put your duffel in your room. Dinner's at 6. Phone's in the basket. On my bed. The comforter was still the same navy from high school. The trophies on the shelf hadn't moved. Middle school robotics. A third-place medal from a city math meet. A participation ribbon I kept because I liked the ribbon more than the race. I set down my bag and studied the door again. Then rules. Written like the bylaws of a small nation. A younger version of me might have argued point by point until the house echoed. Another version might have packed the bag right back up and checked into a motel. I did neither. I took out my notebook. The one I use for project timelines and lab notes. And wrote the rules down with the date next to them. For the first few days, nothing dramatic happened. The routine slipped around me like a familiar shirt I didn't love, but knew how to wear. If I wanted to run at night, I ran early. At 9:50 p.m. I checked my watch and headed for home. When Maya texted about dropping by with takeout, I called Mom and asked if dinner with a guest on Thursday would be all right. Even though it was only Monday, and we both live in the 21st century. The answer came back, approved. Thank you for asking in advance. At the first family dinner, Dad lifted the wicker basket and tapped it. Phones. I slid mine in with the rest. The conversation stuck to safe topics, the city council's new parking meters, the neighbor's landscaping, a cousin's wedding. Mom told a story that had a moral. Dad offered a statistic to prove it. I passed the green beans. Asked about the dog. And smiled when they wanted proof that I was eating enough. It was almost cozy if I tilted my head and blurred my eyes. Back in my room after dishes, I wrote down the time we finished dinner, and the time the last plate dried. 30 minutes. To the second. A rule is a measurement. I reminded myself. Measurements create data. Data tells stories when people pretend nothing's happening. By the end of week 1, Mom's voice had softened around me. I heard her in the next room on the phone. Bright and triumphant. He needed structure, she said. Some people don't really grow up without firm boundaries. She laughed. I think we finally cracked it. On Saturday, Dad posted a paragraph on social media about tough love. The profile picture he uses is from a hiking trip, sunset light. Staring at yaw line. The pose of a man who gives advice to strangers. The post collected 47 likes. 2 well-saids. And one I wish my kids would listen like that. I took a screenshot and filed it in a folder on my laptop, labeled, Rules. This probably sounds petty. It wasn't like cussed. If anything, I felt old like calm. Like I do when I'm debugging code, and the bug stops being personal and starts being a pattern you patiently isolate. All household members must follow established guidelines. Rule 2 declared. The key word sat in the middle like a hinge established. By whom? When according to what process, if a guideline can appear on my door without my consent, simply because I share a roof and pay for the privilege? What stops it from expanding until I'm a guest in my own life? I set personal criteria to keep myself honest. Give it 2 weeks. Follow every rule to the letter. Document without commentary. If I was wrong, if structure felt like care instead of control, I could eat my pride along with a salad at dinner and thank them sincerely. But if I was right, I wanted something better than a late-night argument that would be dismissed as attitude. I wanted evidence. I wanted a mirror they couldn't look away from. So I became meticulous. I arranged my sheets with neat hospital corners before the Sunday inspection. I put a sticky note on my door titled Inspection Prep and listed what I'd cleaned. Even though the list only mattered to them. When Maya and I planned to meet, I emailed my parents the details, date, time, plan, then saved their approved reply to PDF. When I needed the car to drive to the hardware store for a part, I filled out an index card and slid it under Dad's study door exactly 24 hours prior. Then photographed the card with a timestamp. Evacuumed. I rinsed the sink until it squeaked. I stood in the hallway at 9:58 p.m. once. Just to feel the ridiculousness of waiting for a curfew at an age when my boss asks my opinion in meetings. Day 8. Mom stuck her head into my room with the look of a manager conducting a surprise audit and found nothing to correct. Impressive, she said, scanning the dustless baseboards, the squared-off books, the trash can lined with a fresh bag. A museum exhibit of compliance. See what a little discipline accomplishes. She kissed my forehead and told me she'd bragged at book club that afternoon. You finally understand responsibility. I said thank you. I said I was grateful for a place to stay. Both statements were true in their own narrow ways. What I didn't say was that I felt like an actor memorizing lines for a play I couldn't wait to leave. During week 2, the routines ossified. If I was late from the office, I texted. If dinner ran long, I let Maya know I'd call her after. I kept my phone in the basket without checking it. Even when a message from my project lead flashed her name upside down through the weave like a lighthouse. I watched my parents enjoy the sensation of order restoring itself. The way you enjoy refolding a messy drawer. Their shoulders dropped. Their voices softened. The house hummed. A funny thing happens when you stop resisting. People assume you agree. Mom's tone shifted from managerial to maternal. Dad's advice grew warmer. Less like policy briefs and more like reminiscence. They started to narrate my own supposed transformation over dinner, how a curfew cultivates focus, how shared meals create connection, how inspections encourage pride in one's space. They told these stories to me. But really, they were telling them to themselves, proving a thesis. I kept writing dates and times. From the outside, I must have looked converted. But inside, another clock was ticking. 15 days. That was the interval I'd chosen, long enough to demonstrate a consistent record, short enough that I wouldn't start thinking this was normal. On the morning of day 14, I snapped a photo of my rent transfer, printed the receipt, and slipped it into a manila folder, along with screenshots of Dad's post and a short email I'd requested from a law school friend about the rights of tenants who pay rent while living in an owner's home. It wasn't a legal brief. Just a few bullet points and citations. The kind of thing that reminds everyone, we all live under rules bigger than the ones taped to a bedroom door. That evening, as I put my phone in the basket without being asked, Mom touched my arm. "I'm proud of you," she said. Her eyes were bright. "You'll thank us one day." "I know," I said, and I almost meant it. For a moment. Because lessons live inside. Even the most badly designed systems. For as long as I can remember, I've been fluent in my parents' language lists. Procedures. Laminated certainty. Maybe the only way to speak back was to use their grammar. On day 15, I woke early, made my bed perfectly, and brewed coffee in the quiet kitchen. The house was still. The kind of stillness that used to soothe me as a kid, before big tests. I took out the good cardstock from the office cabinet. The same brand as the original list. I typed a single paragraph in a clean, simple font. I ran it through the laminator. The plastic came out warm and glossy. Edges perfectly sealed. I trimmed them with the paper cutter so the borders matched. I carried the page down the hall and stopped at my door. The original list waited there. Proud as ever. I measured 2 inches below it and pressed the new sheet into place, smoothing the tape with my thumb until the corners lay flat. Then I stepped back and looked at the two of them together, their rules. And the one that, by evening, would make the entire house hold its breath. I was buttering toast when Mom found the new page. She came down the hall with her mug, paused halfway past my door, and went still. From the kitchen I could picture the exact angle of her head tilting as she read. The house held its breath in that peculiar morning quiet, refrigerator humming. The clock on the wall ticking like a metronome. 30 seconds. A minute. Then her footsteps returned. Careful and clipped. And she stopped at the island with the mug suspended between her hands. "What is this?" she asked. I wiped the knife, set it down, and kept my voice even. "It's a rule." A rule. Her smile was still on her face, but it no longer matched her eyes. "You taped a rule to your door?" "Yes. Using the same cardstock and laminator. I wanted it to look cohesive." She glanced toward the hallway, as if the page might follow her into the room. "Read it to me." I pulled the extra printout from my backpack. The paragraph was simple. Asterisk, asterisk, Rule 11. All household rules require the written consent of every adult paying rent to remain in effect. I will review each rule this week to decide which I approve. Mom held my gaze for a beat too long. She lowered the mug with a soft ceramic click. "Ethan, you can't do that." "Why not?" Rule 2 says, all household members must follow established guidelines. I'm establishing one. "That's not what it means," she said. And now, the smile had vanished. "It means you follow what your father and I set. That's always been how we do things." "I know," I said. "And for 15 days I followed it to the letter. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm saying I'm not a teenager asking for exceptions. I'm an adult who pays rent." Before she could answer, Dad came down the stairs, already picking up the current of the conversation. He scanned our faces, then the paper I'd set on the island, and his expression shuddered. "Absolutely not," he said. "This is our house." "Correct," I said. "Which is why I pay you $800 each month to live in it. That makes me a tenant as well as your son." I reached into my backpack and slid a manila folder onto the counter. "I've been documenting everything, the way you taught me to." Photos of the list on day 1. Screenshots of your social media post about boundaries. Dad. My rent receipt. And an email from a lawyer friend, outlining tenant rights. Mom took a step back. As if the words, tenant rights, had temperature. You asked a lawyer? I asked a friend from college who just passed the bar. I said. I wanted to be sure I wasn't inventing something. I'm not trying to start a war. I'm trying to set terms so we don't have to fight over every cup and curfew. Dad's jaw set. You think you're very clever. You think because you make a folder and laminate paper, you can run this house? No. I said. I think if rules are going to govern my life, I should have a say in them. The same as you would if you were paying rent somewhere. Silence opened like a trapdoor under the room. A car rolled by outside. Tire noise whispering against pavement. The dog, asleep under the table, sighed and shifted. Mom was the first to speak. Which rules? She asked carefully. Do you approve? 4, 5, and 6 are reasonable. No eating in bedrooms. Clean the kitchen within 30 minutes. Assigned laundry days. I approve them as written. And the rest? I disapprove of 1, 3, 7, and 10. The curfew. The guest approval requirement. Mandatory family dinners with no phones. And weekly inspections. Those are revoked. Effective, immediately. I kept my tone simple. Almost administrative. Like reading a meeting agenda. 8 and 9 we can discuss as adults. Purchases over $100 if that affects household budget. We can set a courtesy notification. Vehicle. Notice I'll continue to plan ahead for shared use. But a blanket 24-hour rule doesn't account for normal life. Dad let out a short, humorless sound. Disapprove. Revoked. That's not how this works. It's exactly how it works if we're going to pretend this laminated list has the force of law in my life. I said softly. You chose process over conversation. I'm answering in the language of process. He stepped closer. Hands on the edge of the counter. You do not get to dictate terms to us. Ethan. This is not a democracy. I'm not asking for a vote on dinner. I'm asserting the rights that attach to paying rent. If you'd like, I can print the email that explains what constitutes an unlawful eviction in our state. 30 days notice in writing if you want me to leave. If you lock me out or throw my things on the lawn, that's illegal. Mom's face flushed. That is an ugly thing to imply. It's not an implication. I said. It's a boundary. I respect that it's your home. I expect you to respect that I'm not a child here. You can treat me like a tenant. Or you can treat me like family. But you can't choose whichever is convenient minute to minute. The clock ticked 2 more beats. Dad's shoulders rose and held. If you don't like our rules, he said. Each word clipped. You can leave. I picked up the folder, removed a single sheet, and slid it across to him. That's exactly what I'm planning to do when my apartment is ready. The contractor says 2 to 3 more weeks. Until then, I live here under a month-to-month arrangement implied by my rent payments. If you want me gone sooner, give me 30 days written notice. If you try to force me out before then, I'll call my friend and the police if I have to. I would hate that. I think you would hate it more. It would have been easier if someone had shouted. Instead, the quiet got louder. Mom turned the printout of my rule over as if the back might say something gentler. Dad's eyes flicked to the hallway, where the original list gleamed in its plastic, like a plaque in a museum. You're making this complicated, Mom said at last. Her voice had the brittle calm of someone balancing too many plates. It's so simple. We ask for a few basic things to keep the house running. You follow them. We all get along. I did follow them, I said. Perfectly. For 14 days. I came home by 9:55, even when my friends were still out. I asked permission 3 days in advance for Maya to join us for dinner. I put my phone in the basket. I made hospital corners on my sheets. I did it all so we'd be discussing facts, not feelings. And now you want to tear up everything because you're suddenly a lawyer. Dad said. I'm not a lawyer. I said. I care about precision. That's what I do for work. And it's what you raised me to do. If curfew is about safety, we can talk about safety. If inspections are about cleanliness, You've seen my room. If family dinners are about connection, let's have them, because we want to be together. Not because my phone is confiscated like I'm in detention. Mom rubbed the rim of her mug. For the first time, I saw uncertainty cross her face, not the fear of losing control. Exactly. But the fear that the story she'd been telling herself about this situation might be wrong. You think we don't want connection? She said. Small. I think connection doesn't come from lists. I said. Softer now. It comes from trust. I'm here because a pipe burst and ruined my living room. Not because I want to rewind 10 years. I appreciate the bed and the meals and the roof. I appreciate you. And I need you to appreciate that I'm not a boy who needs a curfew. Dad opened his mouth. Closed it. Then tried a new route. Voice low. We're your parents. Ethan. We deserve respect. Respect goes both ways. I said. You taught me that too. Even if you didn't use those words. We stood in that geometry for a while, 3 points at the edges of a triangle no one wanted to cross. Then Mom exhaled and set her mug down decisively. As if the decision had been hiding in the steam. Let me see the email. She said. I handed her the printout. Dad leaned over her shoulder. The bullet points were plain: paying rent confers tenant status, tenants are entitled to habitability and freedom from arbitrary intrusion, landlords must provide proper notice to terminate or to enter, household rules cannot infringe on basic privacy or autonomy, beyond reasonable shared use expectations. It was basic stuff. Not a threat. Just the outline of a relationship that wasn't fully parent-child or fully landlord-tenant, but borrowed obligations from both. Dad read quickly. Then again, more slowly. When he was done, he tapped the paper with one finger. You think this protects you? He said. Maybe it does. It doesn't tell you how to be a son. No piece of paper does. I said. That's the point. He looked at me a long time. I watched the anger recede just a fraction. Replaced by something older and more tired. There's a kind of calculation parents do that kids never see when they're young, the map of what's worth battling over. Where pride ends and love begins. What you'd rather lose than lose the person. I saw him doing that math. At dinner that night. The basket sat in the center of the table. No one mentioned it. Mom asked about the progress at my apartment. I told her the contractor expected to finish drywall by the weekend. Dad asked about a project at work. I told him we'd hit a snag with a sensor and walked him through the fix. It was the easiest meal we'd had in 2 weeks. The quiet between topics wasn't strained. It just existed. After dishes, I went upstairs. The hallway light cast a clean stripe along the wall. The lists gleamed in their plastic jackets, the original 10. My single edition below it. I stood there longer than I meant to. Aware that this might be the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Even if most of it happened in silence. From downstairs. Mom called my name. There was a new note in her voice, tentative. Like someone practicing a word in a language they haven't used in years. Could you come here a minute? When I returned to the kitchen, the wicker basket was gone. The island was clear. Dad was holding a small screwdriver. And Mom had a step stool open by the hallway. We're taking that down. She said. She didn't have to point which one she meant. Dad reached up and loosened the screws on the plastic frame. He lifted the list. Paused. And then lowered it into Mom's hands. The tape marks left faint. Clean rectangles where the paper had blocked the sun. For a second the wall looked like a tan line. What about mine? I asked quietly. Dad looked at it. Then, at me. He set the screwdriver on the counter. Leave it. He said. For now. I nodded. I didn't smile. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like oxygen. That night I lay in my old room and watched headlight shadows scroll across the ceiling the way they used to when I was a kid. The house breathed. Pipes clicked. Somewhere, a branch scratched the siding. I thought about the word consent. About how adult life is mostly a chain of small consents and withdrawals, what you agree to, what you decline, what you sign, what you leave taped to a door. I thought about my parents reading a printout together. About Dad's hand steady on the screwdriver. About Mom's voice when she said leave it for now. In the morning. The frame was still empty where the 10 rules had been. My single page remained. Beneath it, the paint was a shade lighter and a little smoother. Like new skin, under a bandage. I made coffee, and counted the days until the contractor's update. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya asking how the unveiling had gone. I sent her a photo of the hallway, and a single line, asterisk, asterisk, we're negotiating. Her reply came back with a heart. Asterisk, that's progress. Asterisk. Then. A beat later. Be careful. People get wobbly when you move the furniture in their heads. I put my phone face down and listened for footsteps on the stairs. Part of me wanted a dramatic scene. Part of me wanted an ordinary morning with no mention of curfews. Guests. Inspections. Or baskets. What I got was somewhere in between Dad reading the paper. Mom stirring oats. The three of us moving around each other with new awareness. Bumping less. Seeing more. Day 16 began without a rulebook. That was both the problem and the possibility. And before the week was out, both would show up at our door. On day 17, the house tried to pretend nothing had changed. Which, if you've ever worked on a broken machine, usually means something important has shifted inside, and the system is compensating. Dad folded the newspaper with deliberate care. Mom poured coffee and asked if I wanted oatmeal or eggs. Like we were all reading from a script labeled Normal Morning. The empty space on the hallway wall pulsed in my peripheral vision like a missing tooth. My single laminated page hung beneath it. Quiet and stubborn. I talked to Carol after book club. Mom said. Not looking up. Her son moved back for 6 months and it was chaos. She said rules saved their relationship. Carol also made him sign a chore chart like it was a lease. Dad added. Worked out well. I kept my tone even. We all want the same outcome, peace. We just differ on how to get there. Dad's paper made a small sharp sound as he refolded it. Peace comes from order. Ethan. And sometimes from choice. I said. If I join dinner because I want to talk. The conversation is different than if I'm there under threat. Mom's mouth twitched. No one threatened you. I glanced toward the empty frame marks on the wall. We had posted rules. Inspections. And a curfew. That was guidance. She lifted her mug. Set it down. You didn't seem to mind in high school. In high school, I didn't pay rent. That last line landed soft but heavy. Mom rinsed her cup without answering. Dad flipped the paper to the business section and pretended to read an article he wasn't seeing. By afternoon, the truce developed hairline cracks. I was in the garage sorting a box of warped textbooks from the flood, when Dad appeared holding an index card. Vehicle request form. He said. I thought you'd want one for the dashboard when you take the car. I looked at the card. It had boxes for destination. Time out. Time back. Purpose. And a signature line. The date field already had today written neatly in Dad's block letters. I can text you when I take it. I said. And I'll keep the shared calendar up to date. The blanket 24-hour rule is what I don't approve. He cleared his throat. This isn't a rule. It's a tool. Tools shouldn't feel like handcuffs. I said. Then softened it. How about this for planned errands? I'll put a note on the calendar the night before. If it's last minute, I'll send a text and you can say no if you need the car. He didn't move. Didn't blink. The garage smelled like dust and corded extension cables. Texting is imprecise. He said finally. Cards are concrete. Cards get lost. Texts are time-stamped. He turned the index card in his fingers and slid it back into his shirt pocket without a word. It wasn't a victory. It was a stalemate with nicer manners. That evening, I stayed late at the office, testing a fix for a sensor that kept throwing noise into our data. At 9:12, I messaged the family group chat times, running late. Probably home around 10:20. Don't wait up. Asterisk. In the old days, that text would have detonated a miniature war. Now the dots popped up under Mom's number. Asterisk. Thanks for the heads up. Drive safe. I exhaled so hard I surprised myself. When I came in at 10:24, the hallway was dim and quiet. The sort of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. Mom was at the table. A book open but unread. Hi. She said. How was the sensor? Behaving. Finally. She nodded toward the clock. You're late. I told you I would be. Another nod. I know. I'm adjusting. We both looked at the empty rectangle on the wall. Me too, I said. On day 18. The inspection itch resurfaced. Old habits don't vanish, they return like tide. I had just finished folding laundry precisely on my assigned day because, as I'd told them, some rules were fine when Mom appeared in my doorway. She put her hand on the jamb, like it might read my temperature. "Can I come in?" she asked. The sentence startled me. Not the question, but the fact of the question. "Sure," I said, stepping aside. She walked in slowly, as if the room was a museum exhibit about a period of my life. Her eyes scanned the dresser, the bookshelf, the bed so perfectly smooth, it could be a photograph. She touched the corner of my desk, then drew her hand back, like she'd remembered something. "It's very neat," she said. "I like it that way." "I know." She smiled once. "Quick and small. I used to think I was teaching you that. Maybe you taught yourself, and I just stood near the lesson." She turned toward the door, then paused. "It's hard to switch off the part of my brain that checks. I think inspected equals cared for." "I get that," I said. "For me, I inspected equals doubted." She nodded and left, closing the door to a soft click that sounded a lot like respect. Around lunch, the wider world tried to join our private negotiation. Dad's tough love post had spawned a small comment thread. A neighbor named Vince chimed in with a story about making his adult son move out for violating curfew. Someone else linked an article about boomerang kids and boundaries. I watched Dad type. Erase. Type again. Then, remarkably, he didn't respond at all. The cursor blinked in an empty comment box like a held breath. By day 19, the topic we'd left in the discuss, like adults bucket, Rule 8. Purchases over $100 came due. I ordered a replacement monitor for my home setup, a same model I'd had before the flood. When the confirmation email hit my inbox, I forwarded it to my parents with a short note: "Times for your information using my card. Shipping here since my apartment is still under repair. Happy to keep it in the box until I move back if you prefer." Mom replied: "Times. Thank you for letting us know. You can open it in your room. Asterisk. Then, 3 minutes later: Times. If the packaging is messy, please break it down for recycling. Asterisk. It was domestic. Ordinary. Devoid of sermon. Progress. Made of cardboard." That night at dinner, Dad tried a different tactic: memory. "You know," he said, "when you were 10, and we instituted bedtime at 9. You fought it like it was tyranny. Then your grades went up. You were happier." "I was also 10," I said gently, "and my brain needed sleep more than it needed independence. Brains always need structure. And freedom isn't chaos," I said. "It's choosing the structure that fits." He chewed that as if it were steak. "Choosing," he repeated. Not hostile, just trying the word on his tongue. We cleared plates. The basket where phones used to go sat on top of the fridge, empty and a little dusty. Mom noticed me looking. She took it down, wiped it with a cloth, and tucked it inside a cabinet without comment. On day 20, the old system mounted a counterattack. It came in the form of an unexpected guest: Aunt Diane, who never met a boundary. She didn't climb like a fence to test its sturdiness. She arrived unannounced with a casserole and an opinion, set both on the island, and kissed Mom's cheek as if she'd won a prize. "I hear you've got your boy back at home," she said, cheerful and loud. She turned to me. "Lucky duck. Your mother will whip you into shape." I smiled politely. "Good to see you too, Aunt Diane." Aunt Diane arrived asking for the house rules and scoffing at my parents' new approach. She pushed inspections and control. Mom and Dad chose respect. That night, Dad admitted lists once helped him feel less helpless. But he was learning to listen. When my girlfriend Maya stopped by briefly, we followed the new boundaries and left no mess. No lecture followed. Book club day. Mom led guests, including Diane, straight into my room without knocking. I called it what it was: an intrusion. In the living room, I explained that I pay rent and have a tenant's right to privacy and quiet enjoyment. After a tense pause, Mom apologized. We then wrote a simple Shared plan kitchen. Laundry. Guests. Car. Purchases. Quiet hours and added consent and respect. We all signed it. Diane left unimpressed. The house felt lighter. Soon after, my contractor set a move-in date. We packed. I'm joked about giving each other 48 hours notice. And moved me back. I kept the folder of receipts, and our signed page not as a weapon, but a record. As I became a guest at my parents' table again, the old rule frame came down, and we replaced it with a photo from moving day. We didn't need a laminated list anymore, we were practicing the rules by choice. Boundaries held. Love stayed.